Hi guys, I'm Camilla. I'm the LD captain for the speech and debate team at Mission Vista, and this is just one of the many videos showing or teaching you a tutorial on how to do Lincoln Douglas. So this is the first of many, and this one is basically, the first few minutes of this one is to basically give you an overview and then asking you later, is LD even right for you? So this is just giving an overview about what LD even is before you jump in, seeing if you want to do it or not. So this is Lincoln Douglas debate. It ages all the way back to before Lincoln was gonna be president. He was known to be debating against, of course, Frederick Douglass right there next to him. Is also why it's called Lincoln Douglas. So just an overview of Lincoln Douglas debate. It's just a value debate, meaning that we're debating over what's moral, if we think this object or this policy is moral over the other. And a lot of the times in the resolution, it will have ought to be in the specific resolutions referring to a specific policy. So when it says ought to be, either side has to say, no, it ought to be this, no, it has to be that, or ought to be that, meaning that we're debating for morals. What is morally right? What is morally just? The resolution of the topic typically regards a conflict that compromises or questions the right of a certain person or an individual. And the topic changes every 2 months, and you would have to go to nationalspeechanddebate.org to see the topics. So this is the tab right here where you can see the topics. As you can see, it's not August 8th yet, so the topics aren't out. See, this is the Lincoln Douglas novice topic. It isn't the varsity topic because, again, it's not out till August 8th. And all the other kinds of debates and Congress info can be found here. Okay. So just to go over the basics of Lincoln Douglas, it's a debate, of course, like the other debates, where you from Mission Vista is competing against another person from another school in the San Diego district. Usually each student will speak about 3 or 4 times depending on what side you're on, if you're on the pro or the con, the affirmation or the negation. Also, there will be different types of rounds depending on the tournament. So usually the tournaments that we go to regularly, it'll have 4 rounds for each person. But if you go to a tournament that's sponsored or at a big university or a travel one, that will usually take at the end of the year, then it'll be 6 rounds. So just like a typical debate, both sides will argue, and this is in tournament view. We will also practice after school in class, but just like other debates, there's 2 sides and 1 person on each side. Usually before the debate, a person is going to be assigned a side before they get into the room. Just before they get into the room, you're either going to be on the affirmation side or the negation side, and it's always going to be 50-50. And since like I said before, there's going to be 4 rounds, usually 2 rounds are going to be affirmation or 2 rounds are going to be negation. Not in that order though, but in that quantitative amount. In addition, Lincoln Douglas debate will take about 45 minutes, and the times vary if you're on the affirmation or the negation, and usually how long that you stretch your speech or if you use all your speech time. So now going into, is LD even right for you? Usually this introduction of the video is meant for people who are questioning if they're going into LD, and the qualifications or the tips that I'm going to give to you, is LD even right for you, is meant for you to kind of look inside yourself and see, is LD right for me? What I want to do, other types of debate. What do I even want to do debate? Do I want to do speech? Do I want to do parley instead of LD? Or public forum instead of LD? So LD is right for you if you like to independently debate. Now, Lincoln Douglas is the only type of debate where you are by yourself. You depend on yourself, and if you like depending on yourself, or you trust yourself more than others, or your partner, or if you had a quote partner, then you should take LD. Just to go over the other types of debates, if we haven't already, or just a mental run through, we have public forum, parliamentary, policy, and LD, and of course Congress, but that shifts in between speech and debate. So public forum, policy, and LD. Those three, public forum, and policy, those have partners, while as I'll state again, LD is by yourself. LD is also right for you if you think it sounds interesting to debate over morals, or what it ought to be this or ought to be that. You should consider LD because, like policy or public forum, it requires you to be prepared. So if you like to be prepared for stuff, if you don't not like to be prepared like you would for parliamentary, where you have to go in and prepare for 20 minutes, then I suggest you pick LD, or even if it's right for you. Now, if LD isn't right for you, then I suggest not that you click out of this video or you pause this video, but you still listen more, and if you're still not interested, then you could pick another debate. It's totally fine for you. So now we're delving into before we delve into the specifics of LD, we're going to put words to meaning. So in a lot of these slides, it does a good job explaining at what some words are, but for example, in the time limits and the speeches, I don't know if some of you already know what constructive is, or cross-examination is, or crystallization is. So I'm going to run over that really quick. So an affirmative, I hope that we learned in class, as part of vocabulary, affirmative is fighting for resolution, fighting for something. Other synonyms could also be pro, or for something. And then on the opposite of that is negative, the negative side, or negation, or the con side, not fighting for something. As I stated before, in LD or in an LD debate, you will have 2 rounds with affirmation and 2 rounds with negation, meaning that you'll have to prepare 2 cases, 1 affirmation and 1 negation, so you can be ready for those 2 rounds of both aff and neg. And the short term, not just short term of these words, we don't always say affirmation and negation, we say aff and neg. And then constructive comes from these speech times. So if you see 6-minute affirmation, constructive, AC, or negative construction. The construction mostly means that you're setting up your case. You're explaining to the judge your contentions, just your whole case, your resolution, why you should win, and just your basics of the case. So cross-examination can be seen in this schedule after the first 2, after each person has given their first speech. So, for example, if after the affirmation has given their first speech, the negative will do cross-examination. After the negative has given their first speech, the affirmation will give their cross-examination then. So what cross-examination even means is it's just basically a questioning period for either sides on their case. So after the constructive, or after the first speech of each side, the opposite team will get to question the side that has spoken before it. So, for example, for a specific case, after the person has said, "This is my case, this is what I'm striving for," what if you don't understand something, or what if you want to scrutinize it more to kind of give wary to the judge, or kind of tell the judge this case isn't strong? Then you would do this here. You would ask your opponent questions here about their case, or the morals that they believe in, or their value criterion. This cross-examination is very, very important, because it's basically the only time that the 2 opponents will get to discuss to each other, basically at the same time. Not necessarily at the same time, but you'll be able to give, just openly question whenever you want. Usually, I don't know if you've already learned this, but in parliamentary, you would just stand up and ask a question, but this is a designated 3-minute time for question taking. And usually after your AC, or your affirmative construction, you would say, "I am now prepared for cross-examination." So stating that I have given my speech and I am now ready to be questioned about it. So, and then the reconstructive, as seen also in this slide. So when it says 4-minute affirmation reconstructive, it basically just means that after the opponent kind of wears down your case, says, "Listen, judge," or kind of gives a rebuttal, says, listen, judge, my opponent's case isn't wrong because of this, 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 and this. You want to give a reconstructive, not only to just go over your case and repeat to the judge what your main points are and why you should get the win or the vote, but also to kind of rebuttal against what your opponent says about your case. You need to say, no, wait, judge, that is completely not wrong. They either misunderstood or they're wrong because of this, or that you can also look at it in a different way because of that. And then rebuttal, as I stated before, is just basically stating a statement against your opponent or against your opponent's case to kind of discredit it. You could give a rebuttal. It's most important and most convincing to give a rebuttal against your opponent using evidence. And that is also called blocks. And what blocks means is basically, just like evidence is prepared, blocks are kind of like rebuttals that are prepared, kind of having evidence points that you know your opponent will say, and you'll say, hey, I knew that you would say that, so I have an actually evidence piece for this, I have warrants for this, and that's called a block. And it's very important to have a block for your rebuttal against your partner's case. So next, crystallization is the last thing here. And crystallization is basically another word for summarization, meaning that you need to talk to your judge saying that, listen, judge, this is why I should earn the vote. Crystallization is also a very important word that I haven't heard a lot in my debates past. It's basically people just say summing up, or they could say voters as well. This also means voters saying why you should earn the vote. Now that we've put words to meaning, we could go on to in more detail. So as we were referring to this earlier, this is the time limits that each person gets for their speech. And it's really easy to remember, kind of like a phone number, as Etheridge tells us. So it's 6373463. And these are the speeches and the cross-examinations, the times of those speeches. So first the affirmation will go and talk about their case and their constructive. And then the negative will question them about that case. And then the negative will give their case and their constructive and rebuttal against the affirmation's case. So you can see that's why they have a minute longer, because they would usually, it depends how you want to use your time, but ideally you want to spend your 6 minutes on your constructive and a minute refuting your opponent. And then a 3-minute cross-ex for the affirmation, just like the negation had a speech ago. And then next are the final speeches and their rebuttals. So there's a 4-minute affirmation reconstructive or rebuttal, and then there's a 4-minute negative reconstructive and rebuttal, and then the last speech that anyone will give is the affirmation. And if you calculate it right, everyone has an equal amount of speaking time. And the next slide is just a closer look at the speeches. I already said this all, but if you want to read deeper into what this is, it's just basically giving details on each of the speeches. And don't worry if you don't understand what you're supposed to do for each speech, and you don't need to memorize what it says on this presentation. It'll come naturally through practice that we will also do. So how do we get sources of information or warrants for our cases? So first off, we call warrants for our cases cards, kind of like cue cards or index cards that you use to refer to a presentation. So cards can be found in our debate briefs, and debate briefs is also found on speechanddebate.org, and they look something like this. So a champion brief. This was for January and February of last year for Lincoln Douglas brief, and is really, really, really long, but that's also good because it gives you a lot of information. So this is the table of contents. This is a topic analysis that will be given by a certain coach, so you can understand the topic better. And this is evidence for the affirmation, just different types of topics, and then evidence following. A lot of the times, debaters use this as help if they can't find certain warrants, or they can't find certain warrants on the specific topic. If if they either have to buy a study or they don't want to buy a study online, there's a lot of resources on this. So, for example, they have evidence for affirmation. And if you scroll down further, they have specific information pieces on the affirmation. But they also have negation. If I can find it, they also have it's here, but they also have negation. Oh, here we go. Evidence for the negation. So all the evidence that you need for the negation. But this doesn't mean that you should use this for all of your debates, for all of your warrants. It's good to learn how to compile evidence yourself. If, for example, don't have a champion brief, it's kind of satisfying, to find evidence by yourself, to go to Google Scholar or Google, which I will talk about later in talking about cards, and finding the evidence yourself. And sometimes champion briefs doesn't satisfy your value or your value criterion that you want to talk about or want to debate about. So you need to do the research yourself sometimes, or a lot of the times. So also, adding on, briefs can sometimes be, and a lot of times be, credible resources. But many times it can be one-sided and biased. But when we want to look for credible resources, we don't want to look for .coms. The least we want to look at is .orgs. And the maximum we want to look at is studies done by universities or professionals, and studies or researchers that are very, very professional. And it gives some examples here, the NY Times or the WA Post. That's basically the minimum that we'll get. Just anything that's unbiased, or else your opponent will call you out on it, saying that this is a .com, this is a biased blog, or this is just a blog in general. So I know going towards cases, I'm gonna you don't need to worry about getting all the information on this, because we will, again, there will be specific videos, and I will be happy to explain to you guys how to make cases. So, as I said further, you need 2 speeches, one on the affirmation and one on the negation, saying for the affirmation that this resolution is true, or for the negation saying that this resolution is false. And these are just the steps for making your case. I will go over this very quickly because I'm gonna go over this in another video, or just how to make a good case versus how to make what is a bad case. So step 1, the resolution. So it's the resolution of the debate, and as I said, a new one is given to you every 2 months. If you want, in the beginning of your case, you can give a little spiel about what it means, give a quote just relating to it, just to kind of ease into it. I don't usually do that. I just go straight into saying affirmation negation, because I'm usually short on time. I'm usually short on time. So step 2 is the value premise. Value is what you're debating about, or what you think the resolution ought to be about. So to clarify what the resolution is, for example, let's pretend we have a resolution that states a cheeseburger ought to be valued over spaghetti. So see how they have ought to be in the resolution? That's just an LD resolution. A cheeseburger ought to be valued over spaghetti. Now, you probably already made your biased mind over which food is yummier, which food is better. But using a value, you need to figure out how you judge which one is better, because these 2 food items have many good traits. They have nutritional value, good taste, they have aesthetic, they have ease of preparation, but you need to find a yardstick, or what you can measure them, or what you can judge them by, because it's not fair if you judge cheeseburger on just good taste and spaghetti on nutrition. One's gonna lack in either of them. So, for example, if you pick good taste, and if you make a case and your value is good taste, you would want to be rooting for the cheeseburger, because you're saying the cheeseburger has better taste, and that's why you win. That's why you ought to pick the cheeseburger. That's your value. It has good taste. Now, and then you say, but if you look at the spaghetti, it doesn't have good taste to some people. Some people just don't like pasta. They don't like red sauce on their spaghetti. But then if you're rooting for spaghetti, you want to use the value of nutrition. You always want to use the value that is helping towards your case. You don't want to use aesthetic for spaghetti, because then your opponent would say that doesn't match what you're rooting for at all. That doesn't match the spaghetti side at all. So for example, you would, if you're on the side of the spaghetti, your value would be nutrition, because you're saying the cheeseburger doesn't have nutrition at all. It has cheese, which is fat. It has barely any nutritional value. It just has basically the tomato and the lettuce. The buns are just basically carbs, and the meat is red meat, which can clog up your arteries very fast. But then you can state that the spaghetti has nutritional value because it's grain. The red sauce is made out of tomatoes, and it's just carbs that you eat that you can burn nutritiously. So in this debate, you always want to have, in LD, you always want to have the value that benefits your side, just like the cheeseburger and the hamburger debate. So now, going to value criterion, or the criteria. After you state your value premise, you want to name the criteria or the criterion that will use to achieve the value. For example, if the value is nutrition, you might want to state your value criterion as the 4 food groups, just to kind of give it more evidence and back it up, saying how you will achieve it. And then you want to go into your main points. So this is just setting up in the slideshow how the basic structure, or the very, very basic structure of a case would go. So you would say value, common good, quality of life, and then you would give contention 1, contention 2, contention 3. Contentions, I hope you already learned, are just basic arguments. But then afterwards, we want to add evidence to it. So evidence, basically, like I stated before, are warrants. They're cards that we can get off the briefs, or we can look online for them, for example, in Google Scholar. And then the last step 6, is to time your speech, because it's very, very important to fit between the timelines, because if you're too short, if your case is too short, then the judge will say, oh, they didn't prepare, they didn't have anything prepared, and your opponent will look better because they filled the slot. They stopped their speech, they said, thank you, judge, right when the timer stopped, right when the beeper beeped, and that will look amazing. It always does. Trust me, it feels amazing. So you want to time your speech, 6 minutes for the affirmative exactly, and about 3 to 4 minutes for the negation. And if you go overboard, it's always embarrassing, because you have more to say, you have more to use your case, and you can't say it, and you can't refer back to it in the middle of a case because you haven't said it, you haven't given it in your constructive case, your beginning speech. So now it's time to debate. This will obviously get easier as you go to more and more debates, and this technique, or this style that the day goes on, is not just for LD. It's for all the other types of debates, and it's different for speech though, because that has a whole category of its own. But basically for pairings, it's called postings, and they give pairings to show your name, your opponent, and your judge, the room number, and what side you're on. So what you want to do, most people, since they have phones, will take a picture of this. They will go to their room, and usually you will only get 1 judge per two people. And usually when you walk right into the room, and you should be the first one to get to your room. You should be the one to make the first impression, to do all the setup, and you want to kind of figure out what the judge is like. Is he conservative? Is he Democrat? You kind of want to observe his clothes, his or her clothes, the hat he's wearing, kind of see if they're nice, if they're actually serious. It's very important to be serious if a judge can be a coach or a teacher or a former debater, because they've done this before. They can see when you screw up specifically, compared to parents, when they're just there for their kids and they're just there to listen to what you have to talk about. Remember that judging is kind of hard, so you have to, especially for parents that have never done it before. There's a lot of parents that haven't done it before. Not everyone, when going to these monthly tournaments, is going to be coaches, because they don't have time. So usually parents are judging, and it's hard for them because a lot of debaters, they either talk fast, or the parents don't get the philosophy or the evidence or the argument that they're trying to make. And, the judge can't raise their hand like a student in a class and ask them to repeat the specific point. They can't. It's unethical. The judge isn't allowed to. So what you need to do, you need to repeat your points several times. You need to talk at a fast pace, but not super slow. You want to shake your head up and down, and make sure you want to make sure they shake their head up and down that you understand, or they're writing stuff down on their ballot. Now, a ballot is what they fill out or what the judge will take notes on to decide who has won the debate. So flowing, this is a very important part of debate because it's basically just like you're in a classroom and the teacher is giving a lecture, but the lecture is going 12 times as fast as normal. So this is what you do to keep organized. You want to flow. So, for example, everyone is different at flowing. Not everyone is going to do this specific format, and you don't need to memorize this specific format. To be honest, I don't even flow in a straight format. I just flow straight down, and I just draw arrows and bubbles to things that are important, and just bring highlighters. That's how I just flow. And flowing isn't a specific archetype. It can be different to every person. So just remember that flowing is note-taking in a debate. So now it's time to actually debate. Like I said, when you go into a round, the judge will be there, and you usually want to be the first one there. The judge will be in the center of the room, and the affirmative will take the left, and the negatives will take the right. But it usually depends on what the judge wants, and you should ask them to make sure if it's okay. You can arrange the desks for your comfort, and it's always a pleasure to be in your home school, to be debating at Mission Vista High School, because it's just like being in sports and playing on your home field. Remember to be pleasant and nice to your opponent, but also strong and affirmative, because you don't want them to put words in your mouth or them to take the wheel of your case. But you also don't want to be super rude that it's noticeable. It's very, very noticeable to the judge. Or else that would be, they would actually put that in their ballot, saying that you were being very rude, and sometimes it can be the main reason that you lost. Sometimes two debaters can be very, very matched, and the main reason why a person won could be that they were just nicer. In addition, the judges, so just be nice to your opponent, but also be kind of strong and slightly aggressive. This is most important in cross-ex, because cross-ex, you're kind of, think of it as kind of like a witness on the stand, and a lawyer or a prosecutor talking to them and talking to the jury, and the jury is the judge. And basically, you're the prosecutor, just slamming them, just talking to them about their case and questioning them, kind of critiquing it and asking them about it. But then also, as the person that is answering the questions, you need to keep strong to what your morals mean. You can't switch around, because you can't switch around and let them confuse you, because then the judge will see, I don't really trust this person, and this person that's asking the questions is right. Because the person that's asking the questions, kind of like a prosecutor, is shadowing doubt in the minds of the juror, or in your case, the judge. We will practice cross-ex hopefully later, because it's a very hard skill to get down. So, as I said before, you're flowing. When you flow, it's notes that you take during a debate, but it's also very important to pre-flow, meaning that you want to take down notes before you even go into a round. This means that you know which side you're on. For example, you go look at the postings or the pairings. It says that you're on affirmation, so you take out your affirmation case. And sometimes the judges are late to the classroom, or you're waiting for your opponent. You want to pre-flow, meaning that you would write down your value criterion, your contentions, your main points, and your main arguments on your piece of paper that you're taking notes on. So when your opponent refers to them, you shouldn't be writing on your case, your printout case. You should be writing on your pre-flow. This is always helpful, because you don't want to scramble to write what your opponent is arguing against on your case. In addition, any person that is reading a case, for example, the first speech, the affirmative, will stand, make eye contact with the judge, and saying, "Ready, judge? Is my opponent ready?" And once they both say yes, the timer will, the affirmative or the speaker will press their timer, and their speech will start. And then after the affirmative speech, they will say, "I'm ready for cross-examination now." During cross-examination, it's very important to note that it's not arguing back and forth like people do in a normal day. Imagine it's like you and your sibling arguing. You already know what's happening, and you're pointing to each other saying, he did this, he did that, and you're looking at your parent. You're not looking at each other because you're just too mad at each other. You know, you're not fighting against each other anymore because your parent has gone into this, they have intervened, and now you're pleading towards your parent. Well, imagine that parent is the judge. You do not look at each other during cross-examination. Instead, you look at the judge. You just don't look at the judge. You refer to the judge, my opponent, not you or I or him or her, even though you're technically speaking to each other. You don't want to say, you don't want to be looking right at them. So now it's time to debate. As I stated before, this is the time slot, and you will go through this giving speeches, and mostly after you're done doing the constructives and the cross-examinations, it'll just be a plea for just voters, whoever, or just also going against your opponent's case and kind of building yours up. During the last speeches, the 4 last speeches after the reconstructives and after the cross-examinations, you don't want to spend too much time on construction as you did on your first speeches. You want to start going against your opponent's case, but also giving little hints to your judge of what your case means or why you should win the debate. Also, other vocabulary words that we should address is road mapping. So, for example, a person goes up. You shouldn't just start speaking, because then the judge will say, "I wonder where he's going," or the judge will just lose track of what you're talking about, whether you're talking about your case or your opponent's case, and that's just not a good way to go. So you want to do a roadmap, first I will read my negation case, then attack my opponent's case, and then after you read your case, then your opponent will go and make rebuttals. It's also very important to note that if you don't address any points, they're considered dropped. This is the most common error that novice debaters experience because they're so hyped up in this, for example, one specific argument that they forget to address the 2 others. And now you're basically left to defend only this one argument while your opponent has just ripped through your whole case, but you can't because you didn't address it. So, finishing the debate round, it can seem that both of you are hot and heavy, or you know that you won the round, or you know that you lost it. Whichever it is, you still should shake hands with your opponent and thank the judge for judging. Pack up your stuff and leave the room. It's very important to go out together. In my case, in my mentality, I think it's important to go out together and not leave the person in the room. Because the person, for example, could say something to the judge that could change their mind. Or the judge could talk to them about the round that they didn't tell you. Or that the judge didn't tell you anything, but they told your opponent. Usually the judge will want to make a decision. For example, if they're a parent, they're still taking notes, they're still scribbling down ideas about who should win and who should have lost. And it's important to not say anything about what you think happened before you're far, far away from your opponent and your judge. Because you don't want to be, for example, in the room. You don't want 2 things to happen or 2 scenarios to happen. You don't want to be in the room saying that, "Oh, I think I lost," talking to your friend, for example. And then the judge was going to hear that saying, "Oh, well, why should I pick you? You don't even have self-confidence in yourself that you think you won." And then the second scenario you don't want to be caught in is, for example, when you and your opponent go out together and your friend, for example, meets you in the hallway or meets you on your way out of the round. And your friend asks you, "Oh, how was the round?" You don't want to say, I won," or I lost," or "Oh, my opponent was so bad," because again, your opponent is probably going to be most likely really close to you, behind you, or in front of you, and they can hear you, and that's just rude. Remember, sometimes you want to be friends with your opponents. They're actually really good people. They're not all nasty people that they portray to be in their rounds. They just want to win the rounds, just like you do. So this is basically, as I come to the end of my presentation, if you're still not sure whether you want to be in Lincoln Douglas, don't let anything worry you. Don't let the work worry you, I say, because it's all worth it in the end. Even if you don't win, when you win a round, I feel like when you win a round in Lincoln Douglas, it just feels really good because you know that you tried your hardest, and your opponent, it doesn't matter if your opponent was good or your opponent was weak. It just feels really good to win a round. And even if this isn't for you, at the end you realize, I like actually doing partner debates, or like depending on someone, or I actually want to do speech instead. I don't like arguing. That's just fine. But just remember that do whatever brings you satisfaction, honestly, because at the end of a round, I just really like, of course I like winning, but at the same time I like learning why I didn't win that round. So anyways, this was the introduction to the Lincoln Douglas debate, and the slide could be found in the Lincoln Douglas team folder that I have probably shared with you or will share with you in the future, because I don't know you guys yet. But also, if you want to see this and you haven't shared with it, you should email me, contact me, or talk to me in person saying that, hey, could you share that video with me that I heard about or that I saw or that I listened to, and I will gladly do that. So again, I'm Community Champion, the Lincoln Douglas debate leader, and this was the introduction to Lincoln Douglas debate.